Hi, this is Yuki. Today we will continue our discussion of leaders in Commands Colors Napoleonics. Last time we gave a general overview of leaders and specifically talked about artillery leaders. Today we will focus on cavalry leaders, so let's dive right in. First, let's remind ourselves of the leader benefits in this game. A unit with an attached leader may ignore one flag. A unit retreating onto a hex with a lone leader ignores all further retreats. A lone leader may serve as support, and leaders can grant certain command card advantages, such as the ones in Force March and Leadership. For a more comprehensive discussion, please watch part 1 of this video series. I will have the link in the description. So how do these benefits pertain to leaders attached to cavalries? In short, it's mostly about ignoring flags, but as you probably know by now, flags mean different things to different units, so we should talk about cavalry specifically. How much do cavalry units actually care about retreats? In terms of pure movement and advancing towards the enemy, actually not that much. Or at least not nearly as much as artillery and infantry units. Because cavalry units tend to move more hexes per turn, you're not going to set cavalry units back as easily as you do with infantry and artillery units. Because to really set a cavalry unit back a turn, you need to cause enough retreats so that it can no longer reach you on the turn after, which is very hard to do if the cavalry units are already fairly close to you. Because cavalry units ideally spend most of their time interacting with enemy infantry units, retreats do not nearly come up as often as retire and reform, which is a game action that completely ignores the flags rolled against them. So you can see that the ability to ignore flags is less meaningful to cavalry than to the other units in similar situations. There is, however, one situation in which cavalries really do not want flags to be rolled against them, and that is when they are battling an enemy square. But unfortunately, attaching leaders does not solve one of the core issues regarding cavalry retreat, which is their inability to ignore bounce flags. This is the rule that is very commonly missed by players, so it's worth mentioning. A cavalry unit can never ignore flags rolled in close combat by an enemy square, even if they normally can. This applies to various kinds of guard cavalry and leader-attached cavalry, so even if you attach your leader to your cavalry, there is nothing to be gained if the cavalry unit's primary goal is to harass infantry. So, when do cavalry units actually care about ignoring flags? The most important situation to remember is cavalry on cavalry battles. Cavalry on cavalry combat is very swingy and risky because things can snowball out of control with cavalry breakthrough and bonus combat. The ability to ignore flags is the best way to prevent bonus combat. Here is the chart we have shown many times before. It basically shows you that regardless of the attack power, the sharpest drop in probability is between the first and second flag rolled. Therefore, attaching leaders to cavalry is a good way to ensure that your cavalry units are protected against enemy cavalry breakthrough. You may argue that once the cavalry charges and bonus combats happen, things can really get absolutely wild, and many times the probabilities do not predict what actually happens, just because things can be so swingy. But over many games, I think you will definitely start to see that sometimes ignoring one extra flag is the difference between your entire flank getting decimated or not. In fact, this is what makes guard cavalries and cuirassiers so much more valuable than regular cavalry. And attaching a leader to a regular cavalry unit more or less upgrades it to a guard, if you want to think about it that way. And hopefully this achieves the same effect as artillery leaders we talked about last time, which is to discourage your opponents from charging in the first place. There is a potential interaction between cavalry leaders and the leadership command card. If you manage to attach multiple leaders to cavalry units, this card essentially becomes cavalry charge. However, this does require a lot of setup, and it requires the scenarios to give you enough leaders and cavalry units in the first place. But if it's not out of your way, it's something that you can definitely consider doing because it can become some major upsides later in the game. Overall, I do believe that attaching leaders to cavalry is somewhat situational, and you're often better off attaching them to artillery units. First of all, because cavalry units fight in melee, The units are depleted much faster and the leaders have a higher chance of dying, even though the dice phase distribution is the same as artillery. So you should always use your best judgment regarding how much you want to risk leaders dying by attaching them to cavalry units in order to gain the benefits. So to summarize, the leader benefits of allowing attached units to ignore flags is situational when it comes to cavalry units, and it's sometimes suboptimal. However, they can be meaningful in specific scenarios. Because of their high mobility, cavalry units do not care about being forced to retreat as much as other units, as they can easily make up for the retreated hexes with faster movement, or not deal with retreats at all if they choose to retire and reform. The most important retreats that the cavalry units care about are the ones resulted from bounce flags rolled by squares, but unfortunately the game rules do not allow them to be ignored in any way, which significantly diminishes the value of attaching leaders to cavalry units overall. Cavalry retreats matter the most in cavalry versus cavalry combat because it is a pretty strong protection against enemy cavalry breakthrough and bonus combat getting out of control. And lastly, a leadership command card can be converted to a cavalry charge if you attach multiple leaders to multiple cavalry units, which requires a lot of setup but does make the card a bit better. Okay, that's all for today. We will finish the discussion on leaders in a future video, where I will go over infantry leaders. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know in the comments section. Please consider joining my Discord server. I'll have the link in the description. Thank you so much for watching and see you next time.